Shalom. Welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon of the Chabados of Dalmar, and together with our co-host Marc Gronich. That's at jbiztechvalley.com and statewide news. We have a very, very special guest with us today, Assemblyman Phil Steck from Colony, Niskayuna, and Schenectady. Well, welcome to the Jewish View.
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
Yeah, thank you, Phil, for coming in and taking the time. It was a very busy session, and we tried booking you earlier to let everyone know. But you're out there on the streets, and that's what comes first. And your constituents and your family come first. So I appreciate you taking the time and being here.
Thank you for appreciating that.
No, it's really good. You were one of the few Jewish assemblymen.
I think. Say few. How many are there really in the assembly?
Out of 150 members, I think there's 20 Jewish, yes, so about 10%.
Well, from my perspective, growing up in the Capital District, that's a lot. Mm-hmm. When I went away to college, I thought the majority of Americans were Catholic because where I grew up, that's the way it was. So, it is
a perspective. Okay, but I did look at all of the district maps for all the legislators, 213 legislators. 96% of the districts have a Jewish footprint in their district, meaning they have a synagogue in their, at least one synagogue in their district.
We have 3 in my district.
Well, and the Chabad house.
Right.
That's right. So you may have 4, because Union does have some services also.
Yes, that's true.
Yes. So, it's a plethora in Schenectady, in Niskayuna.
Yeah, I think the Jewish community is really well represented in the assembly.
It's kind of funny. I didn't know a lot to be truthful, I had run in Schenectady County before, and I didn't know a lot about Schenectady County when I ran compared to Colony, where I've been active for very many years. But there were some neighborhoods in Niskayuna where every other house had a mezuzah, so that was kind of surprising to me. But, certainly it made me feel at home. They have a wonderful Jewish community center in Niskayuna as well.
That's right. Now, you gravitate towards the Reform movement?
Yes, I've been a member of Beth Emeth for many, many years. I did just resign from Beth Emeth because I'm anticipating shortly joining Gates of Heaven, which is in my district. That is the Reform synagogue. It's very close to our district office, actually, which is at 1609 Union Street.
Yeah, and Rabbi Matt Cutler is really terrific.
Outstanding, extremely well respected in Schenectady.
In your background, in your growing up, why did you gravitate towards Reform Judaism?
I think it's, Jewish families that come from Eastern Europe, as mine did, tend to have a variety of different opinions to the solutions to the various problems faced by Jewry in Eastern Europe at the time. My family, my maternal grandfather came from Poland, from Warsaw, my maternal grandmother from Bucharest, Romania, and my father's parents came from Proskurov, which is near Kiev, and for whatever particular reason, their families had gravitated towards that approach. There are certainly other members who are relations of ours who are Orthodox and so forth. But
so basically, you gravitate towards Reform because that's what your parents and your grandparents might have been.
Yes, that's true. And my parents weren't particularly religious, so when I decided to join a synagogue, I felt most comfortable in the Reform.
And your wife is Jewish?
She is not.
She's not Jewish.
So it's a mixed marriage. That is true. And we went through the program at Beth Emeth, which was excellent for families with that experience. Both of my children were bar and bat mitzvahed at Beth Emeth. It was an outstanding experience, and I particularly want to thank Cantor Groper for his work with my son in that time.
That's good. He's a very nice guy, Glenn Groper. Yeah. What is your passion in the State Assembly? What have you been passionate about?
Well, I think that I'm very fortunate to, this is kind of humorous, but because some of the members got in trouble with the law, there were some vacancies, and I got appointed temporarily by Assemblyman Richard Godfrey to the Health Committee, and I share his passion for single-payer health insurance. That's a big issue for me. I'm very interested in economic development. I have a difference of opinion, a strong difference of opinion with our governor on the issue. I do not believe in the so-called Startup New York program. I would favor, I think government does best with economic development when it is constructing infrastructure that the private sector cannot afford to build, and that's been a traditional role that I think government plays very well. I think reforming our healthcare system is critical. It's way too costly. Medicaid is extremely costly. I mean, I'm a Democrat. I support healthcare for the poor very strongly, but I think the way we're doing it is wrong.
Well, you know, we have the Cadillac of Medicaid, the Cadillac system in the country. And which means that there's like a checklist of 30 items, and we check off all of them in this state, or just about all of them.
And that's fine.
Well, but that's where the expensive comes.
Not really, because the expense of Medicaid, the problem with Medicaid is that it's a means-tested program.
Yeah.
And it pays doctors very poorly. So you have to hire people to police the recipients to make sure there's no fraud. You have to hire people to police the doctors to make sure there's no fraud. And we do it at both the state and the county levels, because unlike other states, the counties pay half our Medicaid cost in New York. So the result of all that is that the administrative costs of Medicaid are highly excessive. Private insurers are typically in the neighborhood of 20% administrative cost. I would venture to say Medicaid is probably in the neighborhood of 40% administrative cost. And I think that if you look at Medicare, which is a single-payer health insurance program for the elderly, the administrative cost of that program is about 3 to 5%. Medicare is the most efficient health insurer in the United States. And that is why I think that's the area where we can save money, not by avoiding covering things that people need, but let's start by saving money in the administrative costs. That's a real passion of mine, whether it's education or whatever the issue is. I believe you said it in a prior interview, I listened to you say it. We have, the assistant to the deputy commissioner to the, and 5 commissioners. Right. And that's not really, we need to put the money in delivering goods to the public, not in excessive bureaucracy. So again, I come out, I'll say it, everybody knows it, I'm a New Deal Democrat. I believe in government. I think government has to take the lead in many areas. I believe in government-sponsored health insurance. However, we don't want to do it in a way that is wasteful and doesn't get to the point.
I just know that, it's interesting because I was talking to somebody, and one of our congregants needed a hip replacement, and it was so expensive, and someone just threw it out to me. He says, in Belgium, it's probably 70% less cost. So I don't know the reason for it. I mean, a doctor is a doctor, a hospital is a hospital. I said, maybe we have better coverage. He said, listen, they do it, a good job there too.
Well, I think one of the problems that we have is that there's no central negotiator of what is the correct rate for certain procedures. And therefore, from a physician's point of view, health insurance has been wonderful for doctors, because pretty much over time, the health insurers are going to pay whatever the physicians charge, with the exception of Medicaid, which pays very, very poorly. And I think Medicare has been somewhat in the middle, and I think much more appropriate, and operates quite similarly in point of fact to the countries that have much more progressive approaches to health insurance.
Do you want to hear a gasp around the city of Albany for people who are watching this? I don't have health insurance. Okay?
It is a gasp.
There's a gasp. I don't have health insurance, and I've only had health insurance maybe 10 years of my professional life.
Well,
and I understand what insurance means, and I understand why it's important to have health insurance. And knock wood, I've been lucky that in my life. But I'll tell you one thing, when I go to a doctor and I tell them I don't have health insurance, they give me a lower bill than what they would bill the insurance company, what they're allowed to. So they say, oh, you know, we would bill, it would normally be a $50 bill, but we're going to bill you to give us 20. That's fine.
Well, there's lots of problems in the system. The high cost of going to medical school deters people from going into primary care. There's a lot of problems.
I'm talking about dentists, I'm talking about my doctor, I'm talking about specialists even. You know, if people hear that you're paying out of your own pocket, they're more generous to give you a lower rate. And you know, I don't want to be a part of this healthcare system that is, you know, a big problem. So I've opted out. And I'm
well, you're
going to,
under Obamacare, so-called the affordable.
I'm going to have to pay.
You're going to have to go in.
That's right.
And
the penalty not to go in the first 2 years is less than it would cost to be in.
Well, it's interesting here, in somewhat defense of the governor, though I do think we should be moving in a different direction, that I think under the Affordable Care Act, because New York already provides a lot of the benefits that the Affordable Care Act is making mandatory, we are going to see an increase in the revenue that we get from the federal government, which I think the governor feels will be helpful to our budgetary situation.
Well, that's good.
But on the other hand,
Here's
a point that I think is very critical too in this area is I was an Albany County legislator. Right. I was there when Mike Breslin, to his credit, made Albany County a self-insurer for health insurance. I paid $2,000 a year for health insurance with a self-insured plan in Albany County for my health insurance. I go to the state of New York, I now pay double because it's not a self-insured plan, which I don't understand, since there are way more state workers than there are county workers, and self-insurance works best the more people you bring into the system.
But look at the lobbying effort. Okay, the ones who give the most money, the lobbyists that give the most money, is the healthcare industry.
Right.
They're always at the top of the list.
They don't give money to the...
no, they give the legislators. They give money to the
legislators.
legislators.
Yeah, they don't give it to the people who support single-payer health insurance like myself.
But they're at the top. When you look at the rankings of who spends the most money on the lobbyists, the health insurance lobbying groups, and there's more than one, are usually at the top 5. So anyway, that could be why we have the system we have.
But I'm thrilled to be on the health committee. And
I'm thrilled you are too.
I'm also on insurance, so
okay.
It's nice to be a part of looking at this.
Now, you mentioned Startup New York earlier. That's an economic development program.
Yeah,
could you explain that to the public first, and then we can get into what it's about?
The theory behind Startup New York, and it's not all bad. Our majority leader, Joe Morelli, gave an outstanding speech in support of this program. It's a question of philosophy, really. What we're trying to take advantage of, what the governor is in New York State policy on this, is the fact that our greatest resource in upstate New York is the fine colleges and universities that we have. So the idea is to have tax-free zones affiliated with colleges and universities that will encourage businesses to locate in those places. The problem is that also deprives us of a lot of revenue that we need, and it's extremely unfair to local businesses who may be already innovating and competing and won't have the benefits of those tax breaks. Also, if you're an engineer, and this is very typical in my district, if you're an engineer and you work at GE Research in Schenectady, and moving in next door is some engineer who works in a tax-free zone, they're going to be you pay income tax, they're not going to be paying any income tax for 5 years. So that doesn't seem to me to be very reasonable. But I think the other thing I don't like about Startup New York is I think it's really a program that's brought on by desperation and not thought. Because we all want to see upstate New York move forward. And the point being is we don't have the revenue to do economic development projects, so what can we do? We can give tax breaks and try and accomplish the same thing. But again, it's a question of what does government do best in the area of economic development. So let's take the Nanotech Center. Okay, the Nanotech Center is an example of government working the way government works best, because the type of scientific equipment that's needed for the businesses that operate there is so expensive that no firm can afford to raise the capital necessary to build it.
So it's a collaborative effort up there.
Yes, and the state can raise the capital to pay for those.
At a reasonable cost, right?
Exactly, and the companies come there and benefit from what the state makes available, and it drives the economic engine. It's not much different than the government building roads or bridges, which private industry can't afford to do, or the subway system in New York, which is outstanding, which started private but couldn't continue private. So I think that there's a lot more. What I would, if I could be in this position, which I'm obviously not, I think the way to attract business to New York is to build the best possible infrastructure for business of any state in the nation, and that'll attract people. If we talk about, for example, in Ireland, they had a big high-tech boom before they squandered it with speculative real estate investments, much like we did. What the government did was it built the infrastructure that enabled those high-tech companies to come to Ireland. So that's more along the lines of what I favor, but we have a lot of problems in New York. We have extremely high real property taxes, especially for upstaters. You know, downstate, my grandparents lived in an apartment all their lives. They didn't appreciate the problem of real property taxes because they didn't pay them directly. So the upstaters, it's a huge problem for us, and I don't know that our downstate colleagues appreciate it.
But you know what? I got to tell you a humorous story. My folks, I grew up in Brooklyn. My folks were paid the Con Ed bill. They came up here and they saw my, at that time, Niagara Mohawk bill, and they said, "Since when do they bill you weekly?" And I'm saying, "No, this is the monthly bill." They said, "That's for a month? This would be a week in Con Ed." So, you know, in a lot of areas, we're very fortunate.
Well, you ought to see the power bill in Green Island, where they have the public Green Island Power Authority. It's much lower than our
it's a matter of perspective,
than our national grid bills.
Right. So I just, you know, but I want to. The Startup New York plan seems to be the motto or the mantra of, if you subsidize it, they will come.
Well, the other problem with it too is, you know, the other states can do the same thing. So a business can come here for a while, they'll do their thing, and then some other state will make a similar offer.
Yeah.
Also, the record of these things is poor. The Pataki administration had their empire zones, and that was remarkably unsuccessful.
No, and the first Cuomo administration back in the 80s had another economic development zone plan and program, and Pataki just changed the name. So
I think the problem with really looking at building our infrastructure is you have to raise the revenue to do it.
Yeah.
And the governor is not a big supporter of the income tax. I have to say I disagree. Americans fought very hard to amend their constitution in the early 20th century to get an income tax, and we have some real crazy approaches in New York. For example, a family making $40,000 a year is taxed at the rate, well, an individual at the rate of 6.45%. And someone whose income is $500,000 to $2 million is taxed at 6.85%. Now, it's true that the lower incomes you qualify for more credits and so forth, but that's just not reasonable. You've got a top rate for people earning over $2 million of 8.82%. I have a legislation that would increase that $500,000 to $2 million up to 7.85, which is still a reduction from where they were several years ago. So. But I think for upstate New Yorkers, where people have low income and pay high property taxes, the income tax is much better for upstate New Yorkers because they don't have to pay as much because their incomes aren't high, compared to the property tax, which everybody's kind of socked with equally in order to support education. So we need major reform of the tax structure. We need a commitment from government to fund infrastructure projects, and we're not going to do that as long as we're decreasing the income taxes.
So let me ask you to change subjects for a minute. There's the Speaker of the Assembly is Sheldon Silver, an Orthodox Jew, a very good advocate for our Jewish community. And he's had some issues over the past couple of years where he would warn legislators not to do, when they do something wrong or some impropriety, he'd warn them first. And then if they did it a second time, or if he found out about it a second time, then he'd sort of do this sort of take action type of thing. And then the third time, 3 strikes, you're out. And Ryan Carbon was one of the examples. That was before you got there, and now Vito Lopez, and we have other examples, Micah Kellner, and other examples of assemblymen who've been in deep water here. It seems that it's men, and in most cases Jewish men, but he's also had a problem in his own. It came out that he was.
Well, Vito Lopez is not Jewish for sure.
No, but he represents Williamsburg, which is a Satmar community. But anyhow, I have now it came out about the speaker's travels and how he would take 5 hours to get to Albany by plane because he would go from he has a U.S. Air credit card, and he would get frequent flyer miles on that. So he would fly to D.C. or North Carolina or Philadelphia, and then fly to Albany from there just to rack up extra miles. And he would have to, once in a while, once or twice, he had to delay session because he had a delay in the layover, and he couldn't get back here when he wanted to. Meanwhile, he could take a plane out of Newark on United, where he doesn't have the frequent flyer miles, and come directly to Albany out of Newark, but he didn't take that. And he could get a driver, and he could just drive up here in 2.5 to 3 hours from Lower Manhattan, and he would be entitled to a driver. That's a common perk that someone in his position would have.
Throw out something from the Talmud. See what you think. I always thought of it. It says, in order to be an official person, so really I know it's against democracy because the man off the street could be an assemblyman and a councilman. That's the beauty of America. You don't have to be the royalty and nobility. That's the whole Constitution was built on that. On the other hand, in the Talmud says a person, like to be a judge or be an official, should be rich. And why is that? Because that they won't be tending to take a bribe. You give them $100. No, I'm a millionaire. I don't need your lousy $100.
Well, that's not true in today's society.
Well, let me make a point about my favorite President Franklin D. Roosevelt. And this is kind of be a little bit controversial, perhaps, but I look out at President Clinton and President Obama. In some senses, they come from very similar backgrounds. They came from kind of broken homes. They obviously were very good in order to reach the heights that they reached in ingratiating themselves with the rich and the powerful. And I think it's been reflected in their unwillingness to take on Wall Street and things of that nature. The contrary is Franklin Roosevelt, who was to the manor born, and he didn't feel the urge to do that. In fact, he talked about throwing the money changers out of the temple to borrow something from the New Testament. And I think that the rabbi's point is somewhat well taken. I think that what I agree with, and there's an outfit called New Roosevelt that promotes this, is I believe in a full-time legislature. Okay. And I think that the legislators, first of all, we have too much work to do. The legislation is too rushed. We spend 3 months of our 6-month session on the budget, and then there's not enough time to do a lot of the other things we do. So I believe in a full-time legislature at a higher rate of pay. I think that would address the issue that the rabbi raised, and it's not going to ever look. People have been bad from time immemorial. It's not going to necessarily eliminate corruption, but I think it would be better.
But what do you think about the speaker's actions? And then you also have the latest thing where the husband of the chief of staff for the speaker had to resign and apologize because of some problems he had with the Metropolitan Council of Jewish Poverty, and he donated money to campaigns that he shouldn't have donated. So he resigned, he apologized, he asked for forgiveness. It's not Yom Kippur yet, but he could ask. I'm just
forgiveness seemed to work very well with the governor of South Carolina.
Yes,
anyway.
It did. That's right.
He got
that's
himself elected to Congress, but
and it could work for Elliot Spitzer maybe too. So I'm just asking you, what do you think should happen with the speaker?
Well, I mean, I don't know that this whole issue of the frequent flyer miles is relatively new.
Yeah.
And the issue of the fundraiser, that I think that the fundraiser obviously was trying to demonstrate that he had this tremendous fundraising capability.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that a lot of people knew that he was doing it by using his position to pressure people.
Okay.
It was wrong.
Okay.
No question.
But what happened? But what do you say should happen? Because we're running tight on time.
The question is, what did the speaker know about it?
And when did he know it?
Right. And if he knew, I think he certainly will bear some of the brunt of it. And I think with respect to the frequent flyer miles, I don't know the facts of that situation. But again, I think that will come out in due time.
Are you still supporting the speaker?
I support the speaker. The speaker has been outstanding in this way. This is the big difference. I've been in government for a long time.
Yes.
And I've dealt with county executives, senators, U.S., all kinds of different people. And I will tell you who the best listener is that I've ever dealt with in government, and it's Sheldon Silver. Mm-hmm. Now, you can talk to him about your district, and you may not get everything you want, but you will get something you want. And a second point...
and he doesn't take a position without the conference giving him the cues.
I think that he's very good at that. And I think a major point with the speaker, and people have to think about this as upstate New Yorkers, this is very important. The question is who succeeds him if he were not speaker. And
maybe we're looking across the table.
Impossible. So anyway, the point being that this speaker has been very interested in upstate New York, witness the Nanotech Center. There is no guarantee that the speaker who might succeed Speaker Silver, which will obviously happen someday, would be of the same mindset, because remember that the bulk of the Democratic conference comes from the 5 boroughs.
Well, traditionally, the speaker has been from downstate, and the majority leader, you mentioned Joe Morelli, has been from upstate. Ron Canestrari upstate, Jim Talon was from upstate. You go way back, and it's always been that split where the majority leader was from upstate and the speaker was from downstate. So, but as far as sits right now, the speaker has your support, and you're okay with all these issues.
I'm not okay with all the issues, Mark, but I think that part of what you're dealing with the speaker is we have to see, if he is the optimum among the alternatives, then I'm certainly sticking with the speaker, which is what I've seen. I haven't seen that he's engaged in any illegal activity. One of the things is when you're speaking...
Like Mel Miller. Mel Miller,
good point. One of the things when you're Speaker of the Assembly is Sheldon Silver certainly has political enemies. And those political enemies are going to use these things, even when they're not particularly significant, and blow them out of proportion in an effort to get the Speaker for political reasons. I'm not in favor of that occurring. I think these things have to be viewed on their merits, and if it turns out that there was improprieties, then that has to be dealt with. But even with the Vito Lopez thing, the Times Union did an editorial on that, and they said very clearly that the speaker can be criticized for not handling it better, but he himself did not engage in impropriety.
Okay, that's great. So, anything else you want to mention in the 30 seconds we have left that we didn't talk about?
I think it's great to do these public service programs, and as you can see, I'm not afraid to address any issue. And one thing I would do is, to my constituents who might see this, I will give you the information. Our office building, in the legislative office building, we're in room 819. Phone number is 4555931. We work there while we're in session,
Right.
and then when we're not in session, we work out of the district office, 1609 Union Street, and the number there is 377-0902.
Okay, thank you.
Very good, thank you very much. I think we give you a blessing that you should grow and have a good effect on the assembly, and that everything should be good and be prosperous for all of us in New York State.
Have a happy Rosh Hashanah. All the best to you. Shana Tova.
Same to you.
Good, yeah, thank you.